Our session today will last maximum 30 minutes. If you've got any questions, I'm going to be happy to answer those at the end. Please put your questions in the chat. You can access the chat at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Also, just to let you know, at the end of the session, my email will be on the end screen. So if I don't get around to answering your questions during the webinar today, please feel free to email me and then I can get back to you. Just want to give you a couple of things about how to navigate the webinar software. If you wish to expand the window that you're seeing the presentation in, you'll see at the bottom in the middle is a small toolbar, and there's an icon on the right hand side, which is the red exit icon. If you look to the left of that, you'll see a square with some cutouts on each of its sides. That icon will expand the window into the full screen. And you can also spotlight me by changing at the top from audience to spotlight, and that will give you a pop-out window with me inside it, and that will also make the presentation larger for you. Okay, so now we've got that out the way, let's talk a little bit about our session today. So to set the scene about what makes a well-formed OKR, I want to, if you like, go back to first principles and think about the definition of an objective and a key result, how they differ from KPIs. Then think about how do teams get their information to create their OKRs. What I'm then going to do is share some tips based on my experience of working with teams, how to create well-formed objectives and outcome-based key results. Share something that has been told is a real game changer to help create outcomes rather than activities, and then I'll pull that all together and wrap it up for you. So let's go back to first principles just quickly. What are OKRs and why do organizations use them? I think it's useful to remind ourselves of this because often organizations like the idea of using OKRs, but don't always get the best out of them. OKRs are a direction of travel, and they're used by organizations to, coin a phrase, move the needle. And the so-called father of OKRs, John Dewar, described them in the following way. If an objective is what we want to achieve, then key results are the measure of how we achieve it. And if we use or look at a specific example with that, I will achieve sustainable revenue growth, as measured by an increase in monthly sales from 6,000 to 7,000 units and an increase in the number of support packages sold from 100 a month to 150 months. So 2 ways to measure the success of our objective. And if we put that into OKR format, there's the objective, and what we have there are 2 key results. Okay, so that's from first principles. Now let's have a little think about OKRs, KPIs, because I've often been asked by organizations, well, now we're using OKRs, do we really still need to have KPIs? And the answer is yes, because they're different. So let me give you a metaphor here. If we think about a car dashboard, and if we think about OKRs being the GPS, so that is the thing that sets your direction and tells you where you're going. KPIs, they're the other parts of the dashboard. So they're the things like your fuel, your oil temperature, the speed. So that's the other metrics that you're measuring and constantly checking as you're going on your journey. So if we think about that, then OKRs, if they're your GPS, they give you your strategic goals and how you get them. KPIs are your wider set of measures that help you measure your overall health and performance against your goals. So they're 2 different things. And just to continue that metaphor a little further, if we think we've set in a car, we've set our GPS and we're going towards our destination, what we notice on our dashboard is that our fuel is getting low. So what we then do is we reprogram our destination to find a service station to go and fill up with fuel. So we go to the service station, we fill up with fuel, Our dashboard now tells us that we've got a healthy fuel amount. We then reset the final destination and we continue back on our journey. So one of the great things that we can use, excuse me, with OKRs is if a KPI is going off track, we can use an OKR to bring it back in line. So there are two different things, okay? And that's, I think, really useful to know. Well, let's now think, if we know what OKRs and KPIs are, when a team is creating their OKRs, how do they create them? Where do they get that information from? And so OKRs, remember, define a direction of travel. So where do we get that direction from in our team or in our business unit? Well, we get it from our North Star, and the North Star will be the organization OKRs. So organizationally, there will likely to be a set of annual priorities, and then these annual priorities are likely to be narrowed down into 3 to 5 OKRs. Now, what effective organizations will do is have a mix of what we call top-down and bottom-up OKRs. Top-down OKRs are where a key result from a team is used to create an objective for a team that's hierarchically below them, okay? So they've taken that key result, and then the team below will use that key result to create an objective for them. Bottom-up objectives are when a team looks up to that North Star, looks up to those North Star OKRs to decide their own priorities, which they then convert into OKRs. And OKRs are more effective when they align and don't cascade down through the organization. And what that means is that, for example, an objective would have a number of key results, and those key results could be from different teams. Those key results could be aligned together in a way that one might be dependent on another, or one might be supporting the successful outcome of another. So where OKRs work really effectively is when you've got that level of alignment, which of course means there has to be openness and transparency. And I'll say this, like I've said in all of my sessions, we have to have great psychological safety within the organization if we're to be effective with our OKRs. So when we create our objectives, what we need are our objectives to be qualitative and motivational and provide a focus. So objectives are not business as usual. And because they're a focus, we only need 3 or 4, okay, 5 maximum, but remember it's about focus. So 3 or 4 is best. And then each objective would have likely 3 or 4 key results. So the key results are the metrics which gauge the progress of your objective through the period. They're a set of outcomes, which we're going to talk about. They're not activities or initiatives. They will be comprised of a set of activities or initiatives. So that's really key here. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about, because often key results start off being activities, and we need to make sure that we can create them into well-formed outcome-based key results. So let's go back to the objectives. How do we create a well-formed objectives? So if teams are using the organization North Star OKRs, which are likely to be annual, now the unit and team OKRs are likely to be shorter term, either likely to be 3 monthly or 4 monthly. And when you're creating your OKRs, when you're moving the needle, it's also going to be important to think about the level of stretch for your objectives within your team. Okay, how much are we really going to push this, particularly when we're maybe starting to consider what some of the metrics are? Now, we spoke in our last webinars about the importance of psychological safety. And if you haven't seen those yet, head over to our website or our YouTube channel, and I'm going to provide the link to that at the end of our session today. So if we want our teams to set an aspirational, or what's often called a moonshot objective, we have to give them the space where they have a psychologically safe place to stretch themselves, to know they can ask for help, to know they can flag up challenges, and also to let them know that they can fail and that there are no repercussions from this. Because as you see from what's on the screen, that when we set an aspirational objective, we aim for 100%, but actually if we get 60 to 70%, we will take that as an achievement. The committed objectives, they're the ones that need to be achieved 100%. So if you're interested, just linking back to psychological safety, if you're interested in the link between psychological safety and high-performing teams, one thing I can recommend looking at is the outcomes of Google's Project Aristotle, because there's some real important stuff there. So based on my work with teams, let me give you a checklist for creating a well-formed objective. Okay, 5 points that I'm going to put here. And if you can answer yes to these 5 questions, it is likely that your objective is well-formed. So in terms of the language, is it motivational? Is it based on a destination? Okay, so is it outcome-based? Is it based on a destination, somewhere that you want to be? Okay, is it memorable? So it's easy to say, there's no jargon in it. Is it inspirational? Does it inspire people? And is it purely containing, it's qualitative, it's not got any numbers in it, it doesn't have metrics in it. Okay, so those are our 5 key points. Well, how do we create it then? So let's just put our list back up on the screen. And because what's motivational and inspirational definitely is subjective, let me share my thinking with you about what some motivational and inspirational yet easy to remember objectives might be like, using our checklist here. So reduce departmental costs by 10% by year end. We would probably agree that's not massively motivating and inspirational. It's also got a number in it. Okay, so it doesn't really fit our criteria on the left there. But what about if we have it this way? We have unlocked smarter ways to save, ensuring every euro works harder and fuels our long-term growth. We would probably all agree that that is a bit more inspirational, a bit more motivational. It certainly doesn't contain a metric. Okay, let's look at another one. Increase product usage by 15% in Q3. So again, not massively inspirational. If we change the language, inspire usage in our product so our customers can't live without it. It's got a very different framing. It's got a very different tone here. Also, we've taken out the metrics. Final one, close $1 million in new revenue by the end of the quarter. So it's a great goal to have. In terms of OKR language, we could do it better. So we could reframe that as we've built new partnerships by forging meaningful connections that bring lasting value. How we measure that will come to when we look at our key results. Now, what I've talked about here is framing the language. The key thing, don't spend too long reframing the language, okay? Run with what you come up with. You do not want to spend hours and hours or days, or even like one company that I worked with, weeks iterating with the minutiae of language, because if you do that, you won't actually crack on and get anything done to progress your OKRs through the quarter. So psychological safety is really important with teams. When we get to the retrospective at the end of the quarter and we review our OKRs, if we didn't get the wording quite right, that's okay, because we learn from that, and that will then inform what we do for the following quarter. Okay, so if we've got our objectives, what we now want are well-formed key results. So the most effective key results are the ones that describe an outcome rather than an activity. This is the measurement bit. Now, I'll explain in a moment why, using some examples. What we want is an outcome, not an activity. Activity-based key results are about completion of tasks or activities, initiatives. Outcome-based key results measure the outcomes and describe the value added of those tasks, activities, or initiatives. And outcomes measure a change or difference in metrics. Now, you know when you've created an outcome-based key result because you're using words like increase, improve, decrease, reduce, maintain, reach. You know when you've created an activity because it starts with a verb like launch, build, run, create, do, make, deliver. So you put a verb at the start which clearly defines an activity. And the challenge is you can complete an activity, but actually nothing significant will change in the outcome. And we're going to talk about that because that's key. But like the objectives, I gave you a 5-point checklist to check the well-formedness of an objective. Let me give you a 5-point checklist so you can gauge how well-formed your key results are. So here we go. Firstly, the key result needs to be accepted by the person that owns it, particularly if you've got a level of stretch in there. If you've created an aspirational key result, we want the person owning it to have agreed and accepted that. We then need to make sure that we're able to measure the progress towards the achievement of the objective. So it's actually going to contribute to moving it forward. It's specific, using words like improve, decrease, reach, maintain. It's an outcome and it's got a measurement in it. Okay, so it's quantitative. So let's have a look at what that means. Let's have a look at a couple of these. So if we think about, first of all, creating an outcome, let's start with an objective. Our team members are happy and engaged. Great objective to have. When we're looking at how we measure that, often the first pass at creating a key result will be an activity. So we might say, well, okay, what we want to do then to measure whether our teams are happy and engaged is encourage at least 90% of them to give feedback in the staff survey. Well, here's the thing. What if when we do get 90% of team members giving feedback, but in that feedback, 50% of staff say they're disengaged and unhappy at work? Well, what it means is that we've achieved the key result of encouraging at least 90% of team members to give feedback, but actually in achieving it, we've not done anything to contribute to achieving the objective. So we need to convert the activity into an outcome so that the outcome of the initiative will contribute to the achievement of the objective. And the way we do that is we ask a question. So what would be a successful measurable outcome of encouraging at least 90% of team members to give feedback in the staff survey? Well, what we might say is, well, wouldn't it be great if 85% of employees said they felt happy and engaged? There is your outcome-based key result. So in general, when we want to convert an activity into an outcome, we have to ask the question, what would be a successful measurable outcome if we succeed with this initiative? So let's try it. Let me give you 3 objectives and let's put 3 activities here. And now let's ask the question of how we can change an activity into an outcome. So let's look at the first one. Arrange 20 new customer visits each month. So what would be that's definitely an activity. What would be a successful measurable outcome if we achieve this objective or if we achieve this initiative? We reach a conversion rate of 15% for all new customer visits. Let's look at the second one. Implement new online chat to answer customer questions. Again, it's an initiative. So what would a successful measurable outcome be if we achieve this initiative? The number of customers calling our helpline decreases by 20%. Last one. All team meetings finish within the time allocated. What would a successful measurable outcome be if we achieve this initiative? When asked, 80% of team members agree team meetings are efficient. So what you get when you use that question is you get the ability in one step to change an activity into an outcome. And remember, the numbers that you pick in the outcome are based on your current information, they're based on facts you have available, or they may be the best guess if you've not measured that before. And when you have your team check-ins during the period, you'll be able to gauge as you go through how good those numbers were. You'll be feeding back whether there are any challenges as the period continues. And that's why these team check-ins need to be weekly or bi-weekly. Yeah, they are essential to keep everyone updated and informed of your progress and if any help is required. Okay, so let's just have a little think about, again, drawing down on these numbers or focusing in a little bit on these numbers. Let's talk a little bit about the idea of leading and lagging indicators. So when setting OKRs, it's fine to use lagging indicators. So lagging indicators are like the final score, okay? And it's okay to use them as long as they change quickly. So like on a daily or weekly basis, because they already tell you what's happened. So for example, you want something like weekly revenue growth, and that means you can see the trends each week to make sure that you're on track. And it's easy to see how your progress directly impacts the goal. Sometimes with lagging metrics, it can feel a little bit more like an art than a science when you're creating them. But the key is to have something you can observe and you can measure progress on weekly. Now, leading indicators, on the other hand, are the early warning signs. They predict an outcome. Okay, so if your indicators are slow to move, so for example, if you're closing major enterprise deals, which might only happen once or twice a quarter, it's better to focus on a leading indicator like the number of sales meetings from new leads or proposals. You need to find metrics that help you gauge your confidence and show you what progress is being made. Another way to address something that's slow to move, like the implementation of a new project or software rollout, as a client spoke with me just yesterday, is to use something called completion percentages. So this is when you have something that will give you a binary key result. So sometimes with larger initiatives, they're slow to move, and it makes sense to make a project into a key result. And what that means is the key result has a binary outcome, as in you either achieve it or you don't achieve it. So if we've got an objective that our website is loved by English and French visitors, but we don't yet have a French version, a key result could be we have a go live French language version of the website. Now that in itself is quite a meaty project. So what we need to do is measure the progress and the success of that throughout the quarter using these completion percentages. And what that means is that as you go through the period, as you go through the quarter or the tertile, what you're able to do is measure your level of success, so that if you don't quite complete it by the end of the period, instead of saying it's a 0, we didn't do it, what you're able to talk about in the retrospective is we got 80% there, or we got 90% there, so that you're able to demonstrate your progress by the end. And importantly, as you go through the quarter, what you're able to do is to define what your progress is, and also articulate what any challenges have been with the team as you've gone through the quarter. So our final two checklists as we pull things together and I wrap up, I want to remind you then, we have 5 key questions to ask ourselves when we're creating an objective to decide whether it's well formed. We have 5 key points to decide, or 5 key questions to decide whether our key result is well formed. And we have this game-changing question that if we start with an activity, which is often the case, and it's definitely easier to start off with an activity, we now have one question that helps us transform an activity into an outcome. Not, as it says on the slide here, an outcome into an activity. So all of this information here is available to you, and will be available on the website. What you'll get as the webinar closes is you will get a link to the part of the website that enables you to download all of our OKR resources that we've created, including links to the last 2 webinars that we've run. So as I wrap up, I see we don't yet have any questions. If there are any questions, please pop them in the chat. We've got 3 minutes to go, so I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope that you've taken away some tips and some ideas to help with your Q4 planning. There will be a link to the recording of this webinar today on the website and on the YouTube channel. It has been my great pleasure to share my tips, my strategies for success. I hope they give you great success with your planning as you go into Q4. Have a great weekend and stay posted for our next session. Thank you so much for your time.